This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, but the real star of today's show is Simagic. It's magic. And we have the Alpha Wheelbase by Simagic, quite an incredible direct drive wheelbase, along with the GT1 wheel rims. And I say rims because there are two different GT wheel rims to choose from. The D model for D shape or flat bottom, and then the R model for the round version of the same wheel that you can use with any of the Simagic wheelbases. So Simagic is yet another entry into that high-end direct drive steering wheel market. It is getting very competitive up at that top end of the grid when it comes to steering wheels and equipment for sim racing, and it just shows you what a wonderful time we are at. So Simagic, these are another Chinese company. So you got these Chinese companies that are directly marketing, directly distributing to the entire world, even though almost everything we've gotten beforehand has pretty much been made in China or of Chinese parts. But now it is the Chinese competitors like Simagic, like Moza, that are directly marketing to us sim racers, and it is actually causing a slight drop in price. So Simagic, these guys have been around for a couple of years. It's amazing that this is the first review that I've done of their products. I knew about them. For some reason, we just never got them into the show, but here they are, and I'm very, very excited to present the Alpha wheelbase and the GT1 wheel rims to you. So at this point in time, with Simagic having been on the scene for a couple of years, they've actually changed their lineup. So they used to have the M10 wheelbase, which was a servo and stepper hybrid, and they've discontinued that model, and now they've gone to the straightforward models of the Alpha Mini, and even an Alpha Ultimate if you can find them out there in the world. In addition to the bases, they do make three different wheel rims. You've got the GT1 rims that we're showing today, as well as a GT4 rim. You've got the P2000 pedal set for the Simagic gear as well, and you even have a sequential shifter. And I have to say, that is a pretty impressive lineup after a relatively short time on the market. So pretty impressive for Simagic right there. So the Simagic Alpha wheelbase on its own goes for about $1,099. And again, depending on where you are in the world, depending on what distributor's going through, that price may vary, and shipping costs will change, and even availability. That's the way it is in today's market. But you're looking at $1,099 for the wheelbase itself. It is a 15 Newton meter direct drive servo motor that is specifically built for sim racing. And it features 1 millisecond response time along with 3 CPUs built into the actual wheelbase. One that controls the motor, one that controls the game interpretation, and one that handles real-time USB communications. It's a 5-pole servo motor that is built into an aluminum enclosure. The motor features a huge resolution of over 262,000 points or something like that, and it features what is now my favorite quick release in the business, that being the NRG style 10 bearing quick release. Now when it comes to the GT1 wheel rims, you're looking at about $529, again, depending on where you are in the world and what distributor you're looking for. And that is equal for either the GT1-D or GT1 round wheel. In both cases, you're looking at a 13-inch or 320-millimeter wheel rim that is covered in Alcantara, and they're basically almost identical. They both have the same wireless, Bluetooth wireless connectivity. They both have the same pattern for buttons and dials and shifters and all that. The main difference being the wheel rim itself, the differences between those wheel rims, and of course the round one has this little cover which you do not see on the flat bottom. Other than that, everything else about the wheels are the same. Both wheels come with a combination of backlit buttons, rotary dials, and even a toggle switch. And I would like to thank Ricmotech, the distributor here in the United States for Simagic gear, for actually sending these over. And you're looking at about $1,629. So if you pick this one with the round version, this pair would be about $1,629. If you buy them as a bundle, you can actually get them for $14.99 through Ricmotech. Let's go ahead and take a quick tour of the Alpha base on its own and talk about some of its features, starting with the way it comes packaged. It comes in a really nice box. It comes in that cutout foam with all the pieces in place, which when I get a product like that, it just makes me right off the bat feel like I'm getting some high-end gear, which this obviously is. Along with the base, you get the USB cables, a power supply, mounting screws, and a warranty card. Looking at the base itself, it is a black on black rectangular box, which has basically become the industry standard for most direct drive wheels we see nowadays. Along the bottom, it is squared off, and along the top, you do see it kind of steps in a little bit, giving it a little bit more of a shape than just a rectangle. The overall measurements of the Alpha base are 4.3 inches or 110 millimeters wide and tall. And then it is 7.5 inches or 190 millimeters long, plus the quick release shaft that extends it out another 4 inches or 102 millimeters. That brings the total length to 11.5 inches or 292 millimeters long. On the top side, you've got the laser etched Simagic logo with the Alpha character. Along the left side, you have the power plug port and the computer USB connection. And on the right side, you have the CAN bus connector for the shifter, and that also works for updating the wheel rim. The bottom is plain, except for the 4 mounting holes. And on the back, you have the manufacturer's sticker. On the front, there is a carbon fiber round cover with the Simagic logo at the top, and that spot also has the power light, and behind that little black cover, the receiver for the wireless wheel communications. Now that we've covered the base, let's move on to the steering wheels and talk about some of the features that are really identical, whether you're talking about the GT1-D or the GT1-R. Again, I've already covered certain things like they are both 13 inches wide or 320 millimeters. The 9 and 3 are in your hand grip position. They're both Alcantara covered, and they both have the aluminum tri-spoke. It's sort of a brushed anodized black look about it. They both have the Simagic logos in the center. This one, the round one, actually has the cover. The flat one is just straight aluminum. And the biggest difference being this one actually has more of an ergonomic shape in the hand positions. So with smaller hands, which I have, I actually did find the D shape to be just a touch more comfortable. This is just your basic round wheel. Sure, you've got a little bit of a thumb spot there, just a little hint of a dent right there, making it not perfectly round, but ultimately it is a round rim with not a lot of shape to it, which is going to be great for oval driving, and it's going to be a real comfortable rim with that Alcantara finish. But again, this one has just a little bit more ergonomic, which actually makes me wrap my thumbs a little bit just by instinct because of these perfectly rounded spots there for your thumbs. Anyway, from that point on, everything is identical. It is the same buttons, the same dials, the same switches, the same paddle shifters, the same quick release. But let's talk about some of those things, and that being the button box area itself, or as I like to call it, the sandwich plate, which has a carbon fiber cover, and the box itself extends beyond that aluminum tri-spoke of the rim. Starting the upper left side of the box, you have a single shielded button labeled with a backlit N character, and just the inside of that is an up and down 3-way switch that is used for calibration mode, not for driving. On the opposite side of the wheel is another shielded button with a backlit P character on it, and just the inside of that one is an up and down 2-way switch or toggle that works with the calibration toggle, but that can also be mapped into the game as well. To the bottom left of the spoke is another shielded button that has an E character on it, and just the inside of that is a rotary dial that can also be pressed as a button. To the right bottom side is a 4th shielded button with an R character on it, and the inside of that, a second rotary dial with a push button as well. The back side of the button box portion of the rim is all aluminum, and is almost an inch or 23 millimeters thick. Slightly recessed into the backside are the shifter mounts. They are aluminum, and you can see red reinforcement rings around the bolts and plastic bushings for smooth and quiet movement. The shifter arms are also aluminum and have magnetic release mechanisms. The shifter paddles are made of carbon fiber that are 1/8 inch or 3.25 millimeters thick and are almost 3.5 inches or 85 millimeters long. The paddles come pre-mounted in their more inboard position, about an inch inwards from the wheel rim, and be moved further outward by 1/8 of an inch. The shifters sit back about 1 5/8 inches or 42.5 millimeters back of the wheel rim and move almost 1/4 inch or 5 millimeters when engaged. The left paddle shifter has a minus or downshift character cut into the carbon fiber, and the right paddle shifter has a plus sign or an upshift on it. Right next to the recessed shifter mounts are 2 spots for the alternate clutch paddles that could be installed onto the wheelbase or perhaps on other wheel rims available. Also on the back side of the button box portion of the wheel is the Simagic label, a USB slot for upgrading the firmware, and a Simagic indicator light. And finalizing the wheel rims is the ultra beefy, ultra positive click 10 bearing quick release that is the same style as the automotive NRG quick release. Now when it comes to installation, I think this is one of the areas the Simagic Alpha base really excels over a lot of other bases on the market for a few reasons. Number one, with it being a compact base, you're not going to run into that problem of it hitting your monitors as quickly as you would with a lot of other wheelbases. So that's a nice pro when we're talking about that. The other is just simply the amount of mounting options, far more than others. Number one, you've got their adapter, which goes right into these 50 millimeter spaced mounting points on the side here, one on each side, and that gives you tremendous angle adjustment. It's going to work on any DIY rig like a wood platform or any kind of a profile platform. It comes with its own hardware and everything. That's about $85 for the Simagic mount. Now, you could do your own mount, so if you have a DIY rig, you're looking at these 2 mounting options on the side. You've got the typical front mounting options on the front, and it comes with hardware to do that as well, depending on if you have the right mount. It does come with the bolts to go into the threads. And then on the bottom, you've got what has become, to me, the standard Fanatic 4-bolt pattern. And I would say that at this point in time, 99% of the rigs on the market actually come with that 4-bolt pattern already drilled into the rig. So it is that easy, and it comes with all the hardware and tools you need. So in my case, on my R seat, it is as simple as finding the holes, and 4 bolts later, it's all installed. So then we just have to take our USB and plug it into the side here, plug in our PS style power cord into the side here, both on the left hand side. This hand side has the CAN USB or CAN bus connector where you can plug in a shifter, or you could plug in to update the wheel if you need to communicate with the wheel, and then it has the safety switch, which we're not using as well. And then after that, we can just power on the wheelbase. And it's powered on, and then we can just put our steering wheel on it, and we're ready to go. So at this point, we've installed all the software. We have the wheel up and running, recognized by Windows, and it's time to talk about the Alpha Manager software. And I do want to show you all the settings because it is really the main way to control the wheel other than the force feedback setting within game. So starting on the main tab, and this is where most of the settings actually are. Next, you have the calibration page, and this is where you can verify that all your shifters and buttons and rotary dials and that everything are working. The third tab is the state tab, and this is where you can see what your firmware, which version of the software, you can confirm the voltage of the power supply and the system state, and you always want to see this green dot under normal. Anything else is pretty much wrong. And then the factory reset button, which you shouldn't need and hopefully won't. And then finally, you have the update section, or the bootload, where you could then choose a file if you were going to do a firmware update and go through all of that. And it's not very intuitive, but it works, and the wheel did recognize that it needed to do an update, and it took care of it on its own, but it doesn't do anything to verify things other than tell you what boot version you're running. So it's a little different than other software I've seen there. So going back to the settings tab, and again, this is the main tab. This is where you were going to spend most of your time adjusting things. And when you think of a modern wheelbase and what you're adjusting, you always have to think you have multiple different ways to achieve the same goal, which is the feeling that you want in the force feedback wheel. You have settings that are done to the base itself, regardless of what sim you fired up. the base settings is one thing, and we're going to talk about the difference there between the base settings and the force feedback from the game settings, because even though they might sound the same, they do operate slightly different. So on the left-hand side here, we have the basic settings, starting with the total force, and that's very obvious. That is just how strong is the wheel, anywhere from minus 100 all the way up to plus 100. Is the full strength of the wheel, which basically is anywhere up to that full 15 Newton meters of strength. The smoothing setting is also a setting that you're going to adjust to basically adjust how much overall vibration. So if you smooth the wheel out a whole lot, it might actually deaden some of the road noise and some of the other effects, but make it a very, very tame or docile wheel. And then turning it all the way down is going to give you, of course, the most active steering wheel that you get. Now, the next setting is you can actually see with your eyes the difference. So starting here with wheel inertia, that is the speed of the wheel's rotation once it gets going. So just to give you an example, here we are at 100. And if I spin the wheel, you can just see it sort of had its own momentum to it. It just keeps going on its own. Now, wheel spring, we are going to see some major difference when we adjust the wheel spring. So let's put this to 0 so we're seeing all of our settings in action. When we put to the spring, this is basically the center spring. So you think back to old wheels before force feedback and they were just spring activated. So this wheel always wants to pull back to center, and we're even getting a little bounce off of center when we're at the extreme. If I adjust the inertia, does that affect it? Yeah. So when we put the wheel inertia, 100% inertia is actually slowing that down against the wheel spring, which is very interesting, by the way. I would have thought it actually would have worked opposite. Now, wheel damper also will be able to seal. So right now I have everything at 0. And you can see there's like very little friction on the steering wheel. These are not game settings. Again, these are inherent base settings before we even get to the game itself or the sim. Now, if we put the damper all the way up, you can see there's now resistance. A lot of resistance against the speed of the wheel. Now, when I'm turning it, I can feel that resistance in the wheel. So one of the things about it, these new modern direct drive force feedback wheels, is they are super smooth turning. And sometimes faster than a real car is. And we're not talking the game force feedback, we're just talking before you even turn on the game. So I actually do put about 20% damper. I found is about in the range of what I like to do. And it just slows it down from that out of control speed. Same thing with wheel friction. I'm going to put this back to 0. I'm going to put wheel friction at 0. And again, there's the movement. It's very similar to damper. But the friction, now we're slowing it down and it's more just consistent left and right. Versus the damper seems to be a little more affected by the speed rotation than the friction rotation. Now, the total force is one of the things that I will actually adjust. That's the main thing I'm adjusting when I'm changing sims or when I'm changing cars. In the center here, we have the center point. So if your wheel was askewed when you got it, you're going to want to center the wheel and you're going to want to click that center button, and that will make everything perfect, where you should be at 0, 0 when you're perfectly straight, which it's such a fine wheel, it's almost hard to get it right on the money, because any movement, any hair of a movement is enough to be 0.1. Here's where you can adjust the wheel angle. You can see I'm at 900, and if you wanted to have a bump stop that was different than that angle, you could do that. So if you wanted a bump stop that came in, you could actually make it less, and you can actually limit the hardness of the bump stop as well. So if you want it to be very solid or semi-cushioned, you can adjust that there. Beyond that, we have compatibility mode. This sync is whether it's going to use the wheel angle or the limit angle to be the actual stop of rotation, by the way. I didn't cover that, but you can see it changes the highlighted point. Right here, we're going by wheel angle. When I turn this off, it goes by the limit angle. And then you have switch modes, which I think the only reason you use this is to play like Forza Horizon 5 or some total console game that is being played on the PC. Next, here is where you can save your settings. So I'm going to go right to left here. We have these pre-done settings, and I love this about this steering wheel. Pre-done for Assetto Corsa Competizione, then one for the Alpha, including Dirt Rally, Euro Trucks, iRacing, BeamNG. So you have a great starting point for any sim that you're going to get into. And that, for a lot of people, that's probably going to be what they do. For a lot of people, that's probably what they're going to just end up doing. It's like, oh, I play Assetto Corsa Competizione. Let me just load that setting. Boom. If you need to make any changes to that setting, you could then save it. So make it something different. So for me, what I had done was I had gone to the iRacing, ACC Alpha IR, and I used this as a starting point for me. And then I did make some changes, and I made some changes specific to a couple of cars. So you can see that I have an iRacing F3 setup, and then I also have a Mazda MX-5 setup, the two cars I use the most. If you made a change to your setup and you just want to change and resave the F3, so if I drove the F3 and made a change here, and I wanted to change something, I can just hit write storage and it'll overwrite that. And if I want to change it as a new setting, I can just hit save as and name it anything that I want. Now, on the right hand side is where we adjust the settings of the interpretation of the force feedback signal from the game. Everything on the left was adjusting the wheelbase before we turned the game on. Now we're talking about the way the wheel reacts to the forces from the game. Starting with wheel speed, and basically this works a lot like the wheel damper, but instead of being just the way the base is from the get-go, it's the way it reacts to the game. So if you feel like the game signal is a little too fast, you're going to want to slow that down. If you think it's right, you're going to just leave it at 100. Suspension is basically the movement of the wheel. So for example, when you go off-road, you in the grass and you're getting a lot of bumps, or over the curbing, the suspension is going to affect how much that translates the signal into the wheel. So if you want a lot more, you're going to turn that up. You want a lot less, you're going to turn that down. And the next three effects are basically the exact same titles as we had as settings for the wheelbase, but again, it is the way that it interprets the game. So you have the game spring, game damper, and game friction, and they operate the exact same way, and including game inertia as well. It's going to act a lot like inertia. Inertia is the momentum of the steering wheel when turning. And so those are real fine tuning features, and they're the kind of things that you might want to play around with, but again, if you leave it at default settings, you're probably going to be pretty well off for most people out there. And then finally, we have the interpolation level, and this basically works like the speed of the force feedback signal. So on games that play at 60 Hertz, you can turn that up and it's going to feel a little less notchy. And again, a setting that is going to be particular for every sim that you use. So that pretty much takes you through the settings and the control that you have over the steering wheel once you're in each independent sim, and you might make different adjustments. You might find that certain cars are very noisy and cause a lot of noise when going over the curbing. So maybe you actually adjust or turn down the suspension rate in order to get it exactly where you like, where it feels the most. But again, for those stock situations, adjusting just the main force feedback level, either here coming out of the total force of the game or within the sim. And I find that I like to get as much force feedback signal out of the sim as I can, and then turn down the power of the wheel here with total force, allowing the force feedback signal to be as strong as it possibly can. So now, let's get down to driving the thing. Alright, so we just have this thing plugged in, updated all the firmware, have the settings loaded for the default iRacing setup. We haven't changed any of the settings in the wheel software so far. We've told iRacing we're running 15 Newton meters, and I've set the strength to 8.2%, which should be a good starting point based on what I know about iRacing and from past use of other wheels. So let's see what it feels like out of the box, just the way it came without making any changes to the settings. Alright, so pulling out onto the track. Force feedback. Wow, this wheel is really smooth. This wheel is very, very fast turning. Look at that. Look at just how easy I can do it. There's a fair amount of force feedback, not an overwhelming amount of force feedback. Going over some curbing, and I can feel a little bit of rumble effect. It's a little quiet, but it's definitely, it's a little more severe. It depends on the curbing. Under braking, I can feel a little drive on the front wheels, that's for sure. And definitely got a little bit stronger force feedback in the corner. Looking at my clipping or my force feedback strength bar right now. Let's see, we are... Actually, whoa, I just looped the car. Now we just felt a collision. Take our hands off the wheel. So, one thing I'm definitely feeling or seeing on the clipping meter, which you can't see here, it looks like that 8.2, I think, and I'll get back to my thinking on force feedback here in just a moment, but I think we have the right amount of signal coming out of iRacing right now. And so we're going to go with that. A car coming out 3.5 seconds behind me. We're okay. You can see there's some bounciness in the wheel. Definitely getting some good force feedback vibe off of it. Definitely feeling that front end. And again, super duper smooth. Super linear movement. So again, I have no flex. That quick release is super solid. Wheel rim super solid. The wheel base is very robust and strong. All right, starting to get used to the effects. It is very, very quick turning. That is the biggest thing that I feel on the stock settings. Super duper quick, super duper smooth. A little bouncy even. You can see how much it try to kind of wiggle a little bit there like that. Now me personally, I'm probably going to turn up the suspension hits. Feel a little bit more of that, although it'll be track and car dependent on that. So again, some curbing is stronger. Just because it's painted blue and white doesn't mean that it's going to give you a rumble. Feeling a good amount of the rear end kicking out. So when I'm under cornering, we're heavy on that nose, and you can feel the increased strength of the wheel under cornering, especially this high speed corner, the final corner at Phillip Island. You can feel it really well. The minute the rear end starts to step out, obviously that force feedback delivery or reduction of strength is very, very quick response here. And I was able to react with less wheel input to catch it and less throttle to help stabilize it. And that's exactly what I expect from a force feedback. So again, a lot of people are not high-end users. They're going to buy a wheel and use the default settings. And I got to tell you that right now, if I bought a 15 Newton meter wheel, I would probably be looking to use somewhere in that 10 to 13 Newton meter range. That's why I bought 15. Leave a little bit over the top, not fully, but I want to use most of the wheel's capability, or I would have bought a smaller wheel. And if I was going to run it at full strength, I probably should have bought a stronger wheel, if you know what I'm saying. So I feel that right now the force feedback strength is actually pretty good, and that somebody who bought this wheel, ran these settings out of the box, didn't make any changes. I gotta tell you right now, I'm having no problem whatsoever adapting to the sim. I'm able to drive it with total confidence, as much as I did with any steering wheel I had on yesterday or the day before. And the delivery, the strength, I'm just kind of swerving the car, and I can definitely feel that loaded up suspension and grip change. High speed corner, I can feel the loading of the front wheels. Now we're going to enter a slower speed corner. And I'm going to step on the gas. Oh, we're going to go off-roading, and we feel that too. And then, of course, there's the collision result. So again, out of the box, iRacing, I'm pretty darn happy. I would add a little bit of inherent friction to this signal. I would probably add some rumble strip. I would test a higher force feedback setting, but I think we're actually right in the ballpark of the strength that I want for the steering wheel. And the smoothness and the speed of the wheel and the response of the wheel are the first initial thoughts that just hit me, and hit me hard in iRacing. So let's try out another sim or two, and then we'll probably do some settings and get it more tailored for us to really feel the full effect of the steering wheel. So just for comparison's sake, I figure a lot of users are just going to plug in the wheel and use the default settings. You do have, by that drop down, the ability to choose different predetermined settings. So now we're in Assetto Corsa, which by comparison to iRacing is a much better force feedback package. It's definitely more active. It's definitely stronger. I think it's just a better feel and a great test for a wheelbase when doing something like this. So let's go ahead and turn some laps in Assetto Corsa. I'm in the Porsche 911 at Monza, and a car and a combination that I like, and I actually drove not that long ago, so we should feel pretty fresh and decent out of the gate. So when we were in iRacing, the first thing that I felt in initial testing was the amazing smoothness of the steering wheel. Here we are in Assetto Corsa. And yes, that smoothness is still obvious because when you really start turning the wheel, it's smooth. But before you get to smoothness, now we're talking monster power. Now we're talking a wheelbase that is developing a lot of strength, a lot of signal, and forcing me to really hold on for dear life. And honestly, I'd have to turn this down. This is stronger than I like to race with. I think it's stronger than most real-life cars that I've driven on a track, and more than certainly more than I need, and probably more than most would need. So we'll be able to turn this down. But what we're also getting is really amazing, really good delivery of the force feedback. You can see how much and how active I am in the steering wheel, in the middle of the corners in particular. That shaking, and what that is feeling. I can actually feel the car loading up very strongly. I can feel the car getting very loose at times, and you're able to make those fine adjustments. Now, again, the strength is so strong, but that strength also lets you feel not just, again, the smoothness. Now, there's no resistance in the turning. It's just all force feedback. You also feel how robust the whole setup is. The wheel rim itself, there's no flex. You feel the quick release. There is no flex in the system. There is no popping, cracking, creaking, or funny noises, and yet the delivery of force feedback that we're running with right now is a lot more than I'd really want to run with. And it's distinctly different than when we were testing in iRacing. You feel everything that the car is doing. When I swerve it, there's just tremendous amount of force feedback that I'm fighting, and it's all with the wheels trying to come back to center like they really do in a race car, in a real car. When you turn the wheel, you're fighting to turn the wheel because the wheels want to be going straight as a result of caster and camber and the momentum and the amount of friction of being straight versus being turned. So the minute you turn the wheel, you're fighting all of those conditions, and you really feel it. You have to continually turn in even more to get more turning out of the car. Now, under braking, you see that twitching going on. That was feeling the lockup of the wheels. We got a lot of anti-lock on this car, but you can still feel how much the car was dancing on its toes, so to speak, on its front wheels under heavy braking. And you're getting that more than I need. Again, you just heard that, you felt it. That was the rumble strip, the curbing, the bouncing. Oh, wow. Spinning it out was almost a wrist breaker. That's how strong the wheel is. So all of the things that you'd want out of the steering wheel base are there. Really, really good delivery of the force feedback effects. So if we just drop our clutch and sort of peel out, you felt the rear end go a little bit light, and now that we're up to speed, you can feel the strength of the front. But I would honestly have to turn it down. Again, I've said that several times. Again, we're getting 15 Newton meters. That for me is into that boundary of monster power. But I gotta tell you, just one of the great things about Assetto Corsa is the delivery of force feedback is outstanding. You feel everything that you'd want, and it just makes it so that you can just instantly get into the car and feel somewhat comfortable because it's so intuitive. Ooh, when you let go, you get a little bit of a wiggle. That's just a result of the super strong force feedback. We could slow that down with some friction and other things if it was undesirable amount. Might not happen at all when we turn things down. So again, very, very impressive. Let's go ahead and crash the car. I'm going to go ahead and let go of the wheel because I'm a little afraid of what it would do under extreme circumstances. We'll go ahead and royally miss the first chicane here at Monza and just see what kind of happens when we hit the curbing hard. Oh. Yeah, that one initial jerk would have been enough to really get you. So again, initial thoughts. These are the settings I think most people are going to do. I think with a little bit of turning down on the force feedback strength, we're gonna be okay. And there's a lot of great delivery, really good force feedback effects, really smooth still, and no resistance in the wheel other than the force feedback that you want to feel, and a very strong overall wheel rim and quick release. So very impressive. Let's go ahead and make some perfection settings, get this really dialed in, and then we can talk a little more about how it handles out on track. After getting the Simagic Alpha base all dialed in with settings that were perfect for me, tuned in for particular driving conditions, and in iRacing, this meant a bit of damper, a bit of friction, and an increase in suspension, and an increase in interpolation as well. At this point, I could really start to feel how the wheel delivers its force feedback. I had said at the very beginning, but this is a very free-moving wheel. It is as smooth as the smoothest turning wheel that I've ever used. So much so that I actually had to use those tuning settings to slow the wheel down to my preference. The advantage of that friction-free movement is that the wheel's ability to transmit the forces I need at a lightning fast rate and without much distraction of extra forces. The wheel is powerful, far more powerful than I need, and I was running my force feedback much lower than the wheel was capable of. This left a bit of room for more force feedback when needed, and made it so the concept of clipping just was not happening at all when the settings were right and the right amount of force feedback was being delivered. This meant very fast reactions to the car getting loose, and the ability to make adjustments very quickly. When comparing the Simagic Alpha base to other bases, I would call it a bit on the quiet side. First, the obvious. It is a silent wheelbase with virtually no noise coming from any part of it. This includes the wheel's quick release and the wheel rim itself. Every part of the wheel was strong and noise-free. But the other side of that quiet feel is that the wheel is not over-dramatic on the side of force feedback effects like road noise or brake lockup. Yes, there's a feeling of these effects, but less pronounced than some other wheels I've tested. This is an area where more freedom on the software side of things could go a long way in really dialing the wheel into its maximum capabilities. Focusing my attention more on the two wheel rims that I am using, the GT1-R and the GT1-D, I both love and hate the fact that they are covered in Alcantara. They feel great in my hand, so smooth, but at the same time, I know that it will only last so long if I drive without gloves. I have seen wheel rims with leather coverings from Simagic, but they aren't always available. The round wheel has a little alignment bumps on the back of the rim that felt good and helped me find my position on the wheel when turning. But it is a very old school round wheel shape. No ergo feel to it whatsoever. Some will like that, and others will prefer the ergo hand gripped areas of the flat bottom rim. Having smaller hands, the ergonomic grip of the flat bottom wheel actually felt better in my hands. In both cases, the rims were very strong and only allowed movement in the rotational direction. The buttons on the wheel are all shielded, and to an extent, this made me laugh as they are too far away from my fingers to accidentally hit one. With that said, I could operate the top two buttons while driving normally. For the lower two buttons, it did require my hand to pivot off the rim, and for the rotations, it required removing a hand from the wheel altogether. The buttons feel of high quality, and I really appreciate the backlit colored characters as it adds personality to the rim. The paddle shifters are very rigid, not just the assemblies or the arms, but the shifter paddles themselves, and you don't feel any flex regardless of what position you operate them from. At this point, with everything mapped to my desire, with all of my force feedback optimized for me, I am 100% comfortable with this wheel. I have hammered on this thing for quite some time now, and it has come through with some of the best driving and could win me races all day long. So that pretty much tells you everything that you need to know about the Simagic Alpha wheelbase and the GT1 wheel rims available from them as well. But as I always like to do, let's make it perfectly clear with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good, that being, this is really nice construction and finish on all of the parts. Good force feedback. Powerful base, more than I needed. Very smooth turning wheel. Compact wheelbase. No flex in the base, shaft, quick release, or wheel rim. Multiple mounting options, including fits Fanatic 4-bolt pattern. Really cool quick release. Wireless wheel connection, no wraparound cord. Small base for 15 Newton meters. Change the degrees of rotation via the wheel. Save multiple profiles. Rigid paddle shifters. Backlit buttons, super cool. Comfortable wheel rim. And when it comes to the not so good, I don't have a lot of negative things to say about the Simagic products from what I've tested across the board. I mean, when you're talking about the base or the real wheel rims, I mean, I could say that they're expensive, but I mean, they're in line. They're actually less expensive than a lot of the direct drive wheels that you could get for 15 Newton meters. So it's hard for me to even just call that a normal not so good. It is in line with that level of equipment in our sim racing world. It's just expensive if you're comparing it to like a $300 basic starter force feedback steering wheel. Software still needs improvement. Proprietary wheel rims only. Wiring out of the sides. Would like more than 4 buttons. Can only change button lights to on off or slow and fast fade. Generic wheel rim, just the rim itself. And then finally, the Simagic lineup itself, when you go to their website, it still shows the M10. It doesn't show all the products that they have available. It's a little hard to find some of their software. So I think they're still getting over some of the learning curves of coming to the market. But we probably will see improvements there, just like we've seen in a lot of the products. Some of these are different than their original release versions. And now on to the bottom line. Why would you pick a Simagic base wheel rim over other direct drive companies that are out there? I think is the number one thing that people would want to answer the question, or number one question that people would want answered. And the reality is this: depending on where you are in the world, not all wheels are even available to you. Right now, in the current climate of our world, depending on where you are in the world, not all wheels are in stock. So if right now you've saved up your hard-earned money and you're looking to get into the direct drive wheel market, you might not have freedom of selection available to you. That could be a factor in choosing a wheelbase for a lot of people, regardless of what level or what wheelbases and wheel rims they are considering. Another reason you would or could or should pick a Simagic setup is it is a little bit less expensive. So when you compare this to a Fanatic, when you can compare this to a SimuCube, it is a little less expensive per Newton meter than other brands. So it is a little bit of a financial savings, even though it is still very expensive equipment. Don't get me wrong on that. And then finally would be proprietary rims. This is something that I'm never sure if I should put it. If you think about our not so good and our good list, on the good side, we talked about its wireless connectivity. Now, on the not so good list, we talked about proprietary wheels, and they go hand in hand. So in order for this wheel to communicate wirelessly with this base, it has to be a proprietary system, and it does it via Bluetooth, much like the SimuCube version does, where you need particular wheel rims to go with that base so that they can talk together. So that is sort of a good and bad, or a good and not so good if you think about it. The other thing is the Bluetooth connectivity. Some people are going to have a little bit of difficulty with this, depending on the amount of interference in their homes, the amount of communication devices they have in their homes could affect that connectivity. Luckily, you can change the channels to see if you can find a different spectrum that it might communicate better, but that could be an issue for some. And then I think about esport racers. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that if you plug a steering wheel directly into the computer, it's going to be lightning fast, and the Bluetooth connection is going to be a millisecond slower, and for some people that might be critical. I found no delay whatsoever that I could notice, but I'm sure it's there if you really measured it one versus the other. Now, another reason somebody would choose a Simagic Alpha wheelbase, I think this is the fastest turning wheelbase that I've ever driven on. So when I think about the people behind the Simagic team, a lot of them, from what I understand, actually have drifting experience, and that's where their gaming side of sim racing comes from, and it makes total sense that they would make the fastest, freest spinning steering wheel to be able to do some of that drifting. There's my impression of drifting, by the way. But I think it makes a lot of sense. Now for me, with their software, I was able to slow the wheel down. I was able to add a little bit of friction, a little bit of damper, and that got it right to where the normal settings would be on a lot of comparable wheelbases. So again, something I've said for many, many years now is that I think these wheelbases, the direct drive wheelbases across the board, have gotten so similar in their overall feeling beyond Newton meters. So if you took a handful of 15 Newton meter wheels, gave me a little while to make the settings the same, I don't think that you could tell the difference in a blind test, to be perfectly honest with you. It really comes down to a bunch of other factors, not necessarily the distinct differences in feeling, but this was the fastest, quickest turning that I've really ever felt. So I did mention, and now let's talk about software just a little bit. At this point, I've seen software from other companies that allow you more freedom to dial in things like road noise, the curbing effects, the off-road effects, some other details beyond the canned effects that you get with like a Logitech force feedback profile. I think that's something that they can do better with in the Simagic software. I think their firmware update, although it worked perfectly, it was a little hard to navigate through the instruction manuals when I could find them and get through the procedures to actually make those firmware updates and changes to the wheel rims. But in the end, I got everything taken care of. It just took a little bit extra planning and thought, and it's something they could also streamline with their software. The other thing I will say before I pat them on the back for a few more things is their website. Their website, you're almost 100% dependent on the distributor that you bought it from to get good information. Their website has a lot of dated information on it, and again, it doesn't cover all the products that they even have, and it would be really nice if their website matched the quality of their products, because it would probably lead to more sales, to be perfectly honest with you. Sometimes you want to get it not only from the distributor you're going to buy it from, but also from the manufacturer in a way that you feel confident in your purchase. So that's something I advise them. Now, in the end, this was very strong, very robust equipment. I really hammered on this equipment for a long time. Since this wheel and these wheel rims have been out for some time, I wasn't in a hurry to do my review. I wasn't in a race with a bunch of other media outlets. Everyone else has done their review. This allowed me to really race on this setup for over a month and really, really hammer on it. I ran multiple different races, multiple different sims, tried various different settings, a lot of different car and track combinations, and a lot of times I was turning the force feedback up way beyond what I would drive it on just to see the temperature of the base. It never failed me there, just to make sure that everything really held up to the biggest demands that I could put it through. And again, no flex, no wiggles, no strange noises or popping sounds. It worked flawlessly every single mile. So in closing, I would like to thank Ricmotech for sending this gear over for review. It was a real pleasure, and I know it takes a lot for a company to send me this much equipment, so thank you very, very much to Frank and Ricmotech. And I also want to thank Dennis Wilson, and this is a guy, if you're going into Simagic gear, you're going to want to know his name, and his name is Dennis Wilson, and he is like the guru of Simagic equipment. I was having a little trouble getting one of the wheel rims talking to the base. It had turned off, and he helped me get it turned back on, and I just noticed that he's helped out endless amount of people and put out great videos as resources on how to work and get the most out of Simagic gear. I used them as a resource, and if you're considering getting this gear, you're going to want to check that out as well. So I think that tells you everything you want to know about these guys. In the near future, we are going to have the Simagic Alpha Mini. So it's a smaller, lower Newton meter version of this. We also have their GT4 butterfly or open style wheel rim that we're going to do a review on. We have the Simagic P2000 pedal set. We're reviewing and hammering on those as well as their Q1 sequential shifter. So again, an entire lineup of products from Simagic, which is very, very impressive, and it means that I have a lot of fun to come. Thank you for watching this one. Be sure to subscribe so you can get information or notification when our new videos come out. Be sure to thumbs up if you like what we did, and thanks again for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.